Hello, I'm David Nielsen with David Nielsen Associates. Delighted to be with you today. Our topic today is sponsorship. Weak sponsorship for implementing major change is one of the most significant barriers to success, and it's largely misunderstood. I'm going to share a story with you that really highlights one of the big challenges. I was working with a manufacturing organization a number of years ago. They were implementing a lean manufacturing project to really streamline and take cost out of some of their manufacturing processes. It's a fairly disruptive kind of a change. Their head of manufacturing had done a fabulous job of communicating the change, the business case for it. He did it directly to the organization. The messages were reaching the front lines. The problem is that he created what we call a dead zone in his organization. The dead zone was created because he had communicated directly with all the impacted people, but had not ensured that the sponsorship was cascading effectively down through the manufacturing organization. The reason that's important is that he rarely would be seen on the shop floor by all of the hourly workers and supervision and managers. And so the people that were most meaningful to many of those individuals working in manufacturing were their supervisors or managers. The head of manufacturing wasn't as meaningful. So he had created a dead zone in the organization. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Now you'll see that very importantly, sponsorship is second in the Change Management Essentials methodology. Our Change Management Essentials methodology is designed to help you accelerate any kind of implementation, so today we'll talk about the important elements of good sponsorship. Now, we're going to talk about the dead zone a little bit. I'll focus on some key roles, different way of thinking about organizations, and then we're going to get right to the core of what are the right sponsor behaviors. What are some of the typical barriers that we find? Well, in my experience, I find that sponsors are often unaware of the role that we want them to play because we haven't formalized it. Sponsors may be resistant to their role. They really are not up for what is necessary for them to effectively sponsor an implementation. And the big one that I think a lot of us can appreciate is oftentimes sponsors are distracted by competing priorities, and that gets in the way of them being effective on a given implementation. I mentioned before in my story the dead zone. A dead zone occurs when the communication flows to the front lines of the organization, but sponsorship is not really cascading. We're not really communicating and reinforcing the accountability and the roles of those people in the mid-management part of the organization. I find that working with organizations, if I look at a typical organization chart, the typical titles that we all use are not as meaningful in terms of implementation. Implementation roles then become important. You'll see we're focusing on sponsors, agents, and end users. Frankly, these are much more meaningful roles for implementation than your traditional titles in your org chart. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what are the three types of sponsorship. How must sponsors effectively deploy their style, their sponsorship? Three quick things. One, the verbal. You have to talk the talk. Secondly, demonstration. You have to demonstrate that you are sponsoring the change. That's the walk the talk. And three, reinforcing the implementation, putting your money where your mouth is. Those three key types of sponsorship make for the fastest implementation acceleration. And one of the key things that I'm often asked by people in organizations is, okay, so I work in the middle of the organization. How am I going to get my sponsor to be more effective in his or her sponsor role? We use something called sponsor contracting. Some quick tips here. Ask for what you want, very specifically. What is it that you want and need for the success of the project? And be specific, no weasel words. For example, never ask a sponsor for support. It's not specific enough, and they will interpret it in their own way and probably not in terms of what you want and need. And then follow up and recontract with those sponsors when necessary. So the three things that I think will really help you engage sponsors, get more of what you need from sponsors, ensure that the sponsors are continually communicating the business case. Next, ensure that the sponsors remain visible in the organization. When they hide, it's interpreted and not usually positively. And then ensure that the sponsors cascade the accountability to the management layers below them. They're holding the management layers below accountable for implementation success. If you'll follow some of these things, I think you'll have better luck at getting the necessary sponsorship for your particular change. Thank you for your time.